I really don't remember the first time I climbed Mount Rubidoux with my family as a boy, but I do remember that my dad, who I idolize, would drive us down there in his 64 El Camino. We'd park and then walk up the hill. And that's what I think Mount Rubidoux means to most people. It's about creating memories with the family, friends, and our children. It's about us, all of us, and the things that we hold dear. And today, well, my dad's still my hero. We still have the El Camino, and Mount Rubidoux remains as inspiring as it has always been for our family, and we hope yours as well. Steve Johnson, Riverside, California.
Riverside, California. Its 315,000 citizens make it the 12th most populous city in California and 61st in the United States. It was home to the nation's first navel orange trees and birthplace of the state's citrus industry. Riverside is also home to the iconic Mission Inn Hotel and Spa, the nation's largest Mission Revival-style building, and the engine that runs downtown's economic fortunes. And also to the community's beloved Mount Rubidoux, a gathering place for generations of townsfolk. The site is visited by more people, nearly 2,000 per day, than any other landmark in Riverside.
John W. North was one of the main founders of Riverside. He and his group purchased this property, and there's a story that he and others soon climbed the mountain to get a view of their new property. It is not documented, but probably very true. It's the best view from Mount Rubidoux to see the new land that they had purchased.
Long before John W. North's colony for California in 1870 and the expedition of Juan Bautista de Anza in the mid-1770s, Native American people lived in the Riverside region for thousands of years. Indian villages existed along the Santa Ana River in and around what is now Riverside. They considered the land sacred. Later, Spanish, Mexican, and Anglo settlers would inhabit Indian lands, claiming both the natives' property and resources. In 1838, a 30,000-acre tract of land, Rancho Jurupa, was granted to Juan Bandini by the Mexican government. Louis Rubidoux purchased a portion of this grant in 1849, within which contained the land that would become Riverside.
The mountain is named after Louis Rubidoux, an earlier settler in this area. He purchased his property from Bandini and built his ranch. He's sometimes said to be the first subdivider because towards the end of his life, he started selling off some of his property. Part of it was to a silk association, which failed. They in turn sold it to John W. North for the city of Riverside. Because of that heritage, the mountain came to be known as Mount Rubidoux.
In early 1874, Christopher Columbus Miller leaves his wife Mary and their 4 children behind in Tomah, Wisconsin, and sets out for Riverside in hopes of finding work. A civil engineer by trade, he quickly finds work surveying for the local tin mines and sends for his family before year-end. They arrive in November. He purchases a city block of land with a partner in 1877 for $250. The home they built, called the Glenwood Cottage, grew to take in paying guests. In 1878, they built a large addition and the building became the Glenwood Hotel. And on February 4th, 1880, C.C. Miller and his wife Mary sell the Glenwood property to their 22-year-old son for $5,000. His name was Frank Miller, and he would, over the next 55 years, dramatically change the trajectory of his adoptive city. In 1887, a group of investors, one of whom was Albert White, a very good friend of Frank Miller's and the first paying guest at the Glenwood, had designs to build an elaborate resort hotel at the base of Mount Rubidoux that would rival that of the Hotel Coronado. They would call it the Hotel Rubidoux. Work was started, the foundation and some walls went up. An economic downturn eventually led to a bank crash in town. Strong winds then blew down what was actually built and halted construction. The project was never restarted. But Frank now had some ideas of his own about how best to utilize the potential of Mount Rubidoux.
In 1903, Frank Miller opened the first wing of the Mission Inn as we know it today. And soon after, he realized the guests who came here, some of them spent weeks, months even during the winter, needed things to do. So he started tours. He bought touring cars where his brother and others would take these people on tours of Riverside, the orange groves, other places. And then he conceived the idea of this mountain that was here, putting a road up it so that people could go up it, take a tour up it, and see the vistas, the scenery we can see here today, out here. At that time, many orange groves and other vistas they could see. And so he wanted the road built. Again, with some of his connections, probably with Teddy Roosevelt, who had visited here in 1903, he was able to obtain the services of Hiram Chittenden. He was from the Army Corps of Engineers. He later on would do many projects for dams, other things like that. But he had just finished the road in Yellowstone, the first national park. And so Frank thought he would be the ideal person.
Hiram Chittenden graduated from West Point Military Academy first in his class in the area of discipline and third overall. Possessed of an enormous capacity for hard work, a devoted family man, somewhat austere in demeanor, he was nonetheless one of the most accomplished civil engineers in the Army Corps. This despite suffering from what his doctors described as nervous exhaustion for much of his adult life. It was after being confined to a sanitarium with this condition that Chittenden spent 10 days in Riverside designing and drawing up plans for a scenic road up Mount Rubidoux at the behest of Frank Miller, whom he met at Yellowstone National Park in 1905. His list of notable engineering projects spanned the entire nation. Fort Chittenden on Mount Rubidoux is named in his honor.
When Hiram Chittenden got to Riverside, it was suggested to him that he tried to pattern the road and the park to be built here after Smiley Heights and Redlands. Frank was friends with the Smiley brothers, but Chittenden, after examining the mountain, very tactfully stated to Frank that he had a unique situation, far different from Smiley Heights, and he felt that he could design a road that would capture the unique features of this mountain, which he did, with the roads going up and down, curving back and around. He created a very beautiful setting for the Mount Rubidoux Park. With the opening of the road in 1907, Frank Miller opened a vista for people to really enjoy the views of Riverside. They could climb the mountain and see the orange groves back then, now the city as it has grown, the river, and just enjoy the beauty and nature that is here. There's been improvements and changes. As he did with the Mission Inn, Frank was constantly making improvements and changing. The road was rerouted on the top. Seats were added so that people coming for the Easter services, later on the Armistice Day services, could sit and enjoy these events. Peace Tower was added not by Frank, but by people in his honor. There are other plans that never came to be. At one time, a full amphitheater was going to be built here with a grotto. Other ideas were planned, but never came about. But yet, things still are happening up here. The roads right now are being repaved. They're being redone so that the traffic, foot traffic mainly, can come and enjoy the vistas. Some of the rock walls that have fallen over are being reworked so that, again, people can see and enjoy the beauty of this wonderful park. When the road was completed in 1907, there's a dedication on February 22nd, Washington's birthday, in which the main speaker was Jacob Riis. He was a social writer from New York who wrote much about some of the slums and how they could be improved. He was a friend of Teddy Roosevelt and he came to Riverside to speak at the behest of Frank Miller.
One of America's great social reformers, Rees's articles and photographs of the impoverished and downtrodden in the crime-riddled slums of New York shocked his readers. Roosevelt had suggested to Frank Miller in 1903 while visiting Riverside that Rees would make a fine speaker for just about any event that Miller saw fit to have in town.
In that talk, he talked about early California history with the connection between the flag, which was flying above the Fort Chittenden, and the cross, which the early California mission were part of. With that in mind, Frank soon erected the cross on the top of Mount Rubidoux.
Climb the mountains and get their good tidings. Nature's peace will flow into you as sunshine flows into the trees. The winds will blow their own freshness into you, and the storms their energy, while cares will drop off like autumn leaves. John Muir.
John Muir knew whereof he spoke. Considered the father of the national park system, he had famously spent 3 nights and 4 days camping with President Theodore Roosevelt in Yosemite Valley in 1903 at Roosevelt's invitation. He lived to see many of his conservation suggestions implemented, yet died in 1914, 2 years before the U.S. Congress created the National Park Service. In 1907, as a gesture of gratitude to his good friend Henry Huntington for his financial backing in building a road up Mount Rubidoux, Frank Miller had a large boulder affixed with a tablet that spelt out the name Huntington and included the quote from John Muir, as well as a Bible passage.
And so originally this road was known as Huntington Drive. When the plaque was put on later on in honor of Huntington, it also mentioned John Muir, the naturalist, who was the big promoter of national parks. Miller at the time was considering taking over the concessionary at Yosemite New Park. He never did, but Muir wanted to talk to him about, of course, his ideas of Yosemite, what should be there, what shouldn't be. Unfortunately, when Muir came here, Miller was out of the country, actually.
Muir would visit the boulder and his quote on Mount Rubidoux in 1907 and drive to its summit.
The view is charming. I had never seen this country before, and this was a delightful introduction. The view from the mountain is one of the most characteristic that could be obtained. John Muir.
This place right here, as the roads meet, has quite a little history just there. A couple years later, Jacob Riis was back, and on Palm Sunday in 1909, he talked about pilgrimages to mountains. And from there, the following week, Frank and a few friends went up to Mount Rubidoux, carrying a small portable organ, and held the first of the annual sunrise outdoor non-denominational Easter services that have continued almost every year to the present.
In 1914, at the invitation of Frank Miller, legendary African-American educator and lecturer Booker T. Washington visited Riverside and the Mission Inn. When Washington came to the inn and asked, because of his many unhappy experiences, that his food be served in his room, Frank Miller insisted on Washington coming to Miller's private table. Washington was escorted to the top of Mount Rubidoux by Miller to enjoy the view. When Booker T. Washington died the following year, Frank Miller invited the African-American community of Riverside to ask whomever they wished to attend and use the cloister music room for a memorial service. Miller would demonstrate his friendships with peoples of all races, colors, and creeds throughout his life.
At the Mission Inn, there's a row of rooms called Author's Row. One of them is in honor of Carrie Jacobs Bond. She had come to Riverside, came up Mount Rubidoux, and after her visit here, wrote the famous song, The End of a Perfect Day. For many years, that song was played at the end of a day on the carillon at the Mission Inn.
Left virtually penniless by the sudden death of her husband, disabled by rheumatism, and with a young boy to raise by herself, Carrie Jacobs Bond overcame adversity and built a music publishing empire. As the first woman composer to make over $1 million from her music, her song, The End of a Perfect Day, became her biggest hit, selling over 5 million copies, and was inspired by a sunset she witnessed over Mount Rubidoux during a visit to Riverside in 1909. She would continue regular visits to Riverside until her death in 1946.
Besides coming up for that time when she wrote the song, she returned later in 1915 when she had written a special song for Easter that year. It was to be sung by Marcella Kraft. Marcella Kraft was a Riversider who went to Europe and became famous in the German operas. But she returned to Riverside for a number of Easter services, such as 1915.
Marcia Kraft sang a solo at Riverside's Loring Opera House during her high school graduation, prompting Frank Miller to sponsor Marcia's early studies in Boston. From Boston, she and her mother went on to Italy, thanks to another benefactor. It was in Italy she learned opera, and her Italian friends christened her Marcella, the diminutive form of her given name Marcia. She made Riverside her home until her death in 1959.
There are many other Easter stories of famous people who spoke, who sang. It's become quite a tradition to come here for Easter on Mount Rubidoux.
When I'm walking up and I feel the challenge, I think about the cross that's all the way at the top that's waiting for me. One thing I do know is that when I leave, I feel as if I'm lighter and my burdens have been lifted.
I'm visiting from West Covina, and I had no idea. I've lived here for years over in West Covina. I'm up here with friends and family today, and it is spectacular. We love the sights, we love all the interesting things to see around here, and just really enjoying the day.
In June of 1916, the St. Francis Fountain and Shrine was dedicated with tablets placed there by the Audubon Society and the Humane Society in honor of St. Francis, the lover of birds. There was a fountain flowing down that's no longer there. 2 tablets are gone. The mosaic of St. Francis is barely there. And much of the fountain and area is in ruins right now. Riverside Parks Department is talking about restoring it, but it's only right now in the very preliminary stages. This St. Francis Fountain was the first thing you saw when you came in this way from Rubidoux into Riverside. The bridge crossed right here with the two pillars still standing there, the towers, and came right straight at the fountain before it turned and went around the base of the mountain onto 7th Street.
In 1919, Frank Miller started a new tradition, an annual Armistice Day sunset service. The ceremony would honor various World War I Allied nations by flying their national flags atop Mount Rubidoux. And as many as 21 flags flew in the breeze that first year. The tradition would end in 1935, however, the year of Miller's death. To this day, many original flag mounts still dot the landscape throughout the mountain.
Charles Loring was a capitalist from Minneapolis, big in the flour mills, also part of the founding of the Soo Line Railroad. But he's also well known in Minneapolis for his generosity and became known as the father of city parks, having sponsored and helped build many of the parks in Minneapolis. Charles Loring, as did many people from back east, would come out and spend weeks, months, maybe even a couple months in Southern California. And one of the destinations was Riverside and Frank Miller's Mission Inn. Frank Miller was a very genial host, and many of the people who stayed there at the Mission Inn became his personal friends, as did Charles Loring. Loring became very well known in Riverside and was generous also in his adopted second city. Downtown, there was the Loring Building across the street from the Mission Inn, which still is there. Behind it was the Loring Theater, which a number of years ago burned down. There's Loring Park just across the street from where we are at right now. And here on Mount Rubidoux, the father of city parks in Minneapolis also became very much a park person, planting personally trees, shrubs here on the mountain to try to make this a beautiful park setting. A couple years after he died, the last couple winters, he actually did not even make it out to Riverside. The tablet behind us in the rock was dedicated in his honor. The lover of trees is stated on there for Charles Loring.
The Friends of Mount Rubidoux is a group of dedicated and passionate volunteers who concern themselves with all things related to the protection, preservation, and improvement of the park to see that it is maintained for the good of all in the community.
The Friends of Mount Rubidoux is an organization that's very different now than it was in the late 70s and during the 80s. It formed because Mount Rubidoux was not one of the most popular parks in town.
The group was formed and continues to act as a group that promotes the mountain, preserves its history, makes sure that it's kept up, works closely with the Riverside Parks Department to see that Mount Rubidoux is the wonderful park that we have today.
In a close working relationship with some really fine park and rec people, including the person that we have right now that just came here, and she would say to us, we won't do anything up there without talking to you about it, you all.
The challenges of Mount Rubidoux is the continuation of the preservation and repair work. Everything except the mountain itself has been, the road, the monuments, the shrines are man-made, and they do fall into disrepair. Presently, the road's being rebuilt. It needs it. The Friends of Mount Rubidoux need to continue to work with the Parks Department to continue watching over so that Mount Rubidoux, its history, its monuments, are preserved for the next generation. In the early 1990s, the Friends of Mount Rubidoux as a group was revived and soon elected George Flower as their president. He would continue the rest of his life until 2017 as the head of this group and the force behind the promotion of Mount Rubidoux.
When George Flower came, and he's historic. He served for, 20 years probably. He devoted his life to Mount Rubidoux. Everything was centered around George Flower. That's what the name I would be, because it's so critical.
George was the power behind the Friends of Mount Rubidoux from when it was reformed. He lived and breathed really Mount Rubidoux. He and his wife were up here every morning until she died, and then until he died, just the life of Mount Rubidoux.
George Flower had this formula for painting out graffiti that was exquisite. It was just humble tasks to take care of a beautiful open space, and that's so appealing.
In 2002, legendary Southern California TV host Huell Howser filmed an episode of his television program on Mount Rubidoux. In this clip, alongside the Charles Loring Monument, Howser and George Flower discuss the hard work involved in caring for the mountain.
So this plaque has been here a long time, and is there anything else we need to know about it in relationship to?
Well, one of the things that it's supposed to be is a place to rest and meditate on your way up the mountain.
Mm-hmm.
At times they had candles burning here and Easter lilies or flowers around, and there used to be a bench over here so that you could sit and view the city. And as you can see, some of it is deteriorating.
Well, now this looks original, this old concrete fence. Now, is this something that the Friends group would be involved in restoring? And
we are doing that. We have cleaned the plaque, first time in years, and we are working on getting this put back in its original form, and we are fighting the erosion here.
And you're also litter control, right?
We are litter control. We are all kinds of control.
The people of Riverside realized just how important Frank Miller was to the city. It's often been stated that Miller promoted the city of Riverside to promote his Mission Inn. He promoted the Mission Inn to promote the city of Riverside. And very much connected with his Mission Inn in Riverside was this Mount Rubidoux, which he owned. While he was away abroad in 1925, the citizens of Riverside decided to honor him by building a tower and bridge in his honor. Frank Miller was a major proponent of world peace. He held peace conferences at the Mission Inn. He attended peace conferences. So this tower was dedicated in 1925 in his honor. Around the top of the tower, there are symbols of the various nations. The tower was designed by Arthur Benton, one of the architects of the Mission Inn. Inside the tower, there's a large bell. It came from the First Methodist Church in Riverside, who sold it to the city for a fire bell. It did not work for that. It was put in storage until 1925 when it was given to the group building this tower. Many citizens of the city donated to this. The Japanese Americans of Riverside was the largest single contributor to the Peace Tower. And for many years afterwards, they tended a garden at the base, bringing up water themselves to water the plants they had there. This Peace Tower and bridge can be seen from lower parts of Riverside and still stands as a monument to Frank Miller.
The Peace Tower is, there are very few symbols that people recognize. That is one that both represents the city, but also is a kind of iconic image that people will say, hey, that's Mount Rubidoux. There are almost no other place in Riverside which has that identity.
The Olympics were held in the city of Los Angeles in 1932, and one of the participants was a Japanese equestrian by the name of Colonel Kido. He was riding his horse in the steeplechase and was actually winning the race, but he could feel his horse faltering. He knew he had a decision. He could push his horse and he'd win the race, gain the gold medal, but probably lose his horse. So instead, he pulled up, stopped his racing, and saved his horse. 2 years later, when the Prince of Japan was here in Riverside, the Humane Society and others honored Colonel Kido with this tablet you see on the Peace Tower and bridge, honoring how he saved his horse rather than going for the gold medal for himself.
There was a time when the door to that wasn't locked, wasn't sealed to get inside. Inside there's a trap door. And my son and all of his friends truly believed, I think at one time, because they were told that that was a tunnel that went to the Mission Inn. You know, no way. No one knows where he goes. That was there for a reason.
It's important to dispel some of the urban legends that grow up around Riverside and especially Mount Rubidoux. One of the main legends that just doesn't go away is the story that when the Peace Tower was built, that a tunnel was constructed that went from the Peace Tower here all the way down to the Mission Inn, to the catacombs there. That would have been quite a construction feat. And it's one of those urban legends that we can tell the story and laugh about it. For health reasons, Ike Logan came to Southern California, settling first in Lake Elsinore area. When the county of Riverside was formed, he came to work for the county, moved to Riverside, and became part of the early Riverside Cyclists Club. In 1907, he built his house at the foot of Mount Rubidoux on 7th Street, today Mission Inn Avenue. And he started a tradition that would last for over 30 years. Every morning, he would climb the mountain. He would bring his hammer because there's a bell on the northern end of the mountain but did not have a clapper. And 7 times at 7 o'clock, he would ring that bell. Every morning, 7 o'clock for 30 plus years, he woke up the citizens below the mountain. He became known as Ike Logan, the bell ringer. Another tablet in honor of Henry Huntington was placed up here on the mountain in the 1930s. Frank was very thankful for the help in a number of projects that he had from his late friend by that time. One of those who made possible this road, Huntington Road, with his financial support. When Huntington died, Frank was one of the few people that attended the private funeral service for Huntington.
In January of 1906, Frank Miller, Henry Huntington, and Charles Loring, among several others, had incorporated the Huntington Park Association to purchase Mount Rubidoux from the Riverside Land Company in order to beautify the mountain and offer residential lots for sale at its base. The mountain road, plantings, and the cross, tablets, and monuments have all been a part of that plan. The cost to purchase the mountain was $11,000. Lot sales did not materialize as hoped, and over time, Miller obtained most of the outstanding shares by buying out shareholders who no longer wanted or could no longer participate in costs. His heirs would gift the property to the city of Riverside in 1955. In 1930, to commemorate the 20th anniversary of the Boy Scouts of America, local Boy Scout troops dedicated a plaque to one of their biggest supporters, Frank Miller, high atop the mountain summit near the flagpole. The plaque calls Miller a champion of boyhood and advocate of world peace. Scouts started lighting the trails on Easter morn in 1922 and continue doing so to this day. Frank Miller's health began a subtle decline in 1934, and he was conspicuously absent from the 1935 Easter service. On June 15th, the man who so fastidiously promoted his city with unbridled passion and tireless efforts was dead. He was 77. There was no overstating the grief felt by his beloved community, for the identity of the Mission Inn, Mount Rubidoux, and the city with Miller were entwined forever.
When Frank Miller died in June of 1935, Riverside lost one of its greatest promoters of any time. He was instrumental and had been in so many different facets of the city, responsible for bringing Sherman Indian School to Riverside. He was one of the stockholders of the original Riverside streetcars. He was behind so much of the architecture that was chosen for the city. Of course, leftover memorials to him, besides the Mission Inn, is this Mount Rubidoux that we're on. He had the road built and did much of the development of the mountain so that tourists staying at his Mission Inn could see this beautiful city of Riverside. When he died, so much was left behind, but his memory is still here on Mount Rubidoux and in the city of Riverside.
I would imagine as a citizen learning that Frank Miller had passed away, that it would be a time of profound shock and sorrow and perhaps apprehension, wondering where that level of leadership would ever materialize again.
And it's no accident that Mount Rubidoux is here because of Frank Miller, and The books on Frank Miller remind you that he was much more than simply the master of the inn. He was involved in any number of projects which still define this city.
His funeral was held at the St. Francis Chapel at the Mission Inn on June 17th, and a memorial service was held on Mount Rubidoux on Sunday, September 22nd. He is buried at the base of Mount Rubidoux in Evergreen Memorial Historic Cemetery, alongside family and so many of his friends. And perhaps the greatest monument to Miller is not the flat granite grave marker or the upright marble headstone, but instead the view from his grave of his Mount Rubidoux that rises up in the foreground for all of time. Somehow, Frank Miller has found a way to watch over all of us.
I can't help but think that Frank Miller would be thrilled with the amount of people that are enjoying the mountain that he helped develop. The thousands of people that are daily walking up, enjoying the hike, the scenery, the view of the city of Riverside would just be a pleasure for him. He was always about people and events.
Mount Rubidoux is a place where I've been stress-free. I've been coming here since I was a little girl with my aunt. This place is so many memories. I've always spent time with my family here. It's a good place to relax, to reflect from your life and everything. And also, it's a great exercise.
Mount Rubidoux is a part of my mental health toolbox. I walk because walking makes me feel good. It's peaceful, it's beautiful. You get on top of the hill and you see the entire Inland Empire. And it's just wonderful.
Well, Mount Rubidoux has been a great place for me to be able to spend time with my brothers, to get some exercise in, to feel vitality in my body and to actually have some fresh open air. The view is amazing. It's allowed me to get perspective on a lot of things in life.
We are from Mount Rubidoux Seventh-day Adventist Church, and a buddy of ours, Trey, he's not here with us. He's serving in the military right now. He started it, and we've been coming up here for years as a men's group, just walking up the mountain, just talking men's stuff. And so Mount Rubidoux served that purpose for us to get our exercise in and then have some camaraderie.
The daunting task of continuing Miller's work falls to his daughter Alice Hutchings and her husband DeWitt.
DeWitt was active in many organizations, speaking at a lot of the civic gatherings. Very early, he began reading a poem for the Easter services on Mount Rubidoux, and in the latter years, taking over many of the duties for Frank, as Frank was not able to. After Frank's death, DeWitt and Alice took over the running of the Mission Inn and many of the other activities. Upon their death, though, things really changed. The grandchildren of Frank Miller were not interested in running the Mission Inn, and so it was soon sold. And soon also the mountain, Mount Rubidoux, was given over to the city of Riverside as a park and for something for the city to take care of as a legacy of Frank Miller and for the city. In 1909, President William Howard Taft visited Riverside. He arrived by train. They met him with a car, and with him not knowing what was happening, whisked him up the mountain, where they told him to pull the rope. The rope was uncovered or unveiled. The tablet behind us is a reproduction. The original one was stolen. A tablet that is commemorating Father Sarah, the early California missions, and the cross, which is here. Taft commented he wished they would have told him what was happening so he could have prepared a speech, but they weren't looking for a speech there. From here, he was taken down to the Mission Inn, where there was a banquet in his honor, and there the famous Taft chair, the huge chair in the lobby, had been constructed for him to sit in. His comment to the chair was, "I'm not that big." The original cross, placed up there in 1907, unfortunately was damaged by vandals in 1959. It was replaced at that time by another wooden cross. But in 1963, some of the citizens of Riverside banded together again and had the present cross erected and brought up on the mountain. There's an interesting story with that. It was brought in by helicopter. When the helicopter brought in the iron structure, the bare iron structure, they placed it down, bolted the bolts, and then released, or at least they thought they released, the hook holding the iron structure. Helicopter flew away, pulling the cross over, scattering many of the people that were there viewing it. Helicopter had to come back. They unbolted the cross, took it down to Flabob Airport, where they repaired it. A week later, they brought it back, set it down, released it, and the helicopter hovered there until they were sure it was released, and then flew away. The cross was then plastered over, and the cross we see today is still there since 1963.
35 feet tall and constructed of concrete and steel, the cross has also had its fair share of controversy. To say otherwise would diminish those in the Native American community and other non-Christian groups who live among us today, and who believe that Father Serra's California mission system was, at best, forced colonialism and Christianity, a form of incarceration and enforced with a dogged religious zeal. Many others, however, viewed Serra's actions as a sincere attempt to better the conditions of indigenous peoples and non-Christians, and that his motives were intended to be benevolent and much less sinister. Today, there are many on both sides attempting to bridge the gap, educate the community, and develop a mutual respect and understanding moving forward. In August of 2012, the city of Riverside received a letter from Americans United for Separation of Church and State, threatening a lawsuit for having a large cross on city-owned property. The group believed that owning the cross violated a legal doctrine set forth in the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment to the United States Constitution, a complaint that the cross violated the separation of church and state.
In 2012, Totally Mount Rubidoux, an organization, was formed from the Friends of Mount Rubidoux, the Mission Inn Foundation, and the Rivers and Lands Conservancy because of a lawsuit that threatened the cross on Mount Rubidoux. Frank Miller, the builder of the Mission Inn, which was never a mission, was very part of that romanticized version of California history at the time, with the architecture, with the Landmarks Club, which was trying to save the missions. And so the romanticized version of Father Serra, the missions, was part of this lore that is part of the history of Mount Rubidoux.
But then there was a whole body of other people that just thought it represented the city. It was the city of Riverside's cross and the mountain, and that mountain, which meant so much. So we were touching, we thought, both sides of the world that wanted that to stay there.
All kinds of in the neighborhood meetings, in people's backyards meetings to explain what the process was going to be and the purpose to preserve the integrity of Mount Rubidoux as a whole and its cultural history, preserve that access as well.
At that city council meeting, more than 200 residents packed the chambers for a 2-hour debate about the cross, religion, and history, and why this mountain is unlike any other.
Totally Mount Rubidoux came together to gather the citizens of Riverside to raise funds to purchase by auction the area around the cross. The emphasis was on the cultural history surrounding the cross and Riverside.
The community raised nearly $260,000, and in 2013, Rivers and Lands Conservancy, an accredited land trust, purchased the peak for $10,500 at auction.
You're out? Up 10.5, 10,500.
Funds were set aside to support the first 3 years of monitoring and stewardship of the property, as well as for education and outreach. The remaining funds were invested in an endowment so that the interest earned could support the care of Mount Rubidoux Peak in perpetuity.
Mount Rubidoux has been one of the greatest joys in my adult life.
There's no place in Riverside where more people come to and take part in than Mount Rubidoux, which is an enormous change over time. And it's different than the Hollywood symbol, which you can see it. In Mount Rubidoux, you can actually experience it.
When we walk together, I think that's a good thing, because you talk, and the New York Times had a story about walking together. You're not looking at each other, you're both looking ahead, so you're not distracted by that. You just kind of talk, and so that's a really important part of it, I think. And you get to the top, and you can see the whole city, and it's inspiring, and makes you feel good.
It is literally in our backyard, and it's been a resource for us. And I really welcome the city investing money into maintaining it, because it's many ways the best showpiece that Riverside has is Mount Rubidoux.
From the handful of people that were walking the mountain in the early 1990s, when the Friends of Mount Rubidoux was formed, the number has enlarged till today, when there's thousands every day who are climbing the mountain. Weekends, there are just hordes of people coming up here to enjoy the climb, to enjoy the view, to exercise, to be with friends, to remember things. Over the years, though, this has been a favorite site of people. There are hundreds and hundreds of photos that have been taken of people of Riverside when they brought their family and friends. They would climb up here, go up by the cross, and get a family picture taken. There are so many memories that this mountain brings to so many people.
The main entrance early on was here at 9th Street, 9th and Mount Rubidoux Drive. And this is a very narrow street. Ultimately we got where the Glenwood area would be the real entrance area. And more, because you got the Bonnie Moneo parking. All that down there was really the place that should have the main entrance.
It's Saturday morning. I'm here at Mount Rubidoux, one of the most wonderful places to come to in Riverside. I've been coming up here most of my life. It gives you some sense of peace and tranquility when you're up here.
This is a part of my day that makes me be a positive person, and it just de-stresses me from the regular routine that I have during the week.
It eases my mind. It's very peaceful. You can just come with friends and just talk and go up the mountain, and it's a good, healthy lifestyle too.
We love Mount Rubidoux because it's a place to exercise, and we don't live far from here, so it's a good destination for the whole family.
For me, Mount Rubidoux is a place that I got to come to as a boy growing up in Riverside, and now it's a place that I get to share with my children.
For 85 years, automobiles were free to drive up and down the winding mountain roads. This practice ended in 1992.
I talked to a lot of people about the experience that they had driving up there. It was a kind of a place where you might take your car, test it out a little bit on curves, and just kind of a little race around the rocks and all that kind of stuff. So it was a popular place for cars, no doubt about that. If I had a little convertible, and I put the top down, and I would drive up the top, and then that was before I started walking it every day. But it was a popular thing to do. But it became people versus cars, and people needed to win.
Born and raised in Riverside, I've spent a great deal of time in my youth and even today on Mount Rubidoux. Used to drive up with my father back in the 60s and 70s and to enjoy the view from up there and watch the planes land at Flaybob. I myself drove my car up here way back in the day, and friends would drive up to the top, and we got to stay until sunset. I view it as a jewel in our town.
In December of 1998, Our Lady of Guadalupe Shrine Roman Catholic Church in Riverside's East Side community made the first of its annual pilgrimages up Mount Rubidoux to venerate the Blessed Mother, a Roman Catholic tradition. The results have been marked and heartfelt, serving to open Mount Rubidoux to the unqualified participation of Riverside's dynamic and vibrant Mexican-American population, the majority demographic in the city. Since the early 1960s, the city of Riverside had hosted a July 4th fireworks show each year from high atop Mount Rubidoux. The spectacle could be seen from far and wide. With the onset of the COVID pandemic in 2020, the Riverside City Council saw fit to make a change, suggesting an alternative site for future shows.
This all plays along with the pandemic and the fact that they had not done them on Mount Rubidoux for a couple of years. But I always thought that they would return. And it appeared in some ways that that was not going to happen. So the Friends of Mount Rubidoux, among other people, looked to see how we might make that happen and why. It was very important. Why? Part of that was, of course, the fact that being on Mount Rubidoux at that height, thousands and thousands of people could see that couldn't if it's in Bonomenio Park, which is where they've been doing it before.
Beginning in the early 1960s, the city of Riverside started shooting off the fireworks from the top of this mountain so they could be enjoyed by citizens throughout most of the city. You can see them from miles around.
During an October 2022 City Council meeting, the future of fireworks on the mountain would be put to a vote. Citizens spoke overwhelmingly in favor of returning the fireworks to Mount Rubidoux, in hopes that the council would agree. And agree they did.
I will ask our city clerk, please, to call the vote.
Ward 1.
Yes.
Ward 2.
No.
Ward 3.
Yes.
Ward 4.
Yes.
Ward 5.
No.
Ward 6.
Yes.
Ward 7.
Yes.
Motion carries. 2 no votes by Ward 2 and Ward 5.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Thanks to many of the citizens, groups like Evergreen Cemetery, Friends of Mount Rubidoux, the City Council did okay moving them back up to the mountain.
So it wasn't easy in the sense that it wasn't unanimous. It may have been, but there were those people out there that were also very vocal that didn't want it back on the mountain.
With this work being done, there'll be easy access for the fire department and those shooting off the fireworks to oversee so that they are done safely, to the enjoyment of many people.
On Tuesday evening, July 4th, 2023, fireworks returned to Mount Rubidoux.
Tradition, recreation, and inspiration. And for me, that has been the experience with Mount Rubidoux. Mount Rubidoux really is a place that takes a hold of you. And it's not just for me, it's obviously been true for people for 100+ years.